Welcome. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Funkenstein, and speaking truth to power is my game. I want you to live the life that you love and love the life that you live. From the frantic Atlantic to the terrific Pacific, be the best that you can be, and remember to shoot for the moon. And if you miss, hang on the star that you are destined to be. Welcome to the Osiris Effect. I'm your host, Dr. Funkenstein, and today's topic is maternal mortality. Too many times we go into situations and we don't know the obstacles that are put against us naturally and those that are put there by design. So it's about that time that we get educated on things that affect our community on devastating levels. So today we are blessed to have our guest, Terry Ann Harriott, MPH, BSN. These are just some of the alphabets behind her name. She's going to go ahead and break down maternal mortality for us, teach us what it is and how it rates affected in the U.S. as opposed to other countries, and what are the effects of it here on this red Georgia clay. So, ladies and gentlemen, even though she went to Bethune Cookman, we ain't gonna hold that against her. Please welcome Nurse Terry Ann Harriott, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. Welcome to the show, ma'am.
Hi, good evening. I'll correct you. It's the great Bethune-Cookman College, Bethune-Cookman
Okay.
University now.
Oh,
Saying
okay.
put some
I'm
respect.
sorry. I got it. I'm allergic to bull, so I had to get myself before I sneezed. I'm sorry. Okay. All right.
Oh my goodness.
Please tell us a
Anyways,
little bit
thank you
about
for
yourself.
having me.
You're welcome. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
As you mentioned before, I am a registered nurse. I've been a nurse now for the past, what am I, 12 years in now. Um, I have a special interest in public health, particularly around maternal and child health. Maternal mortality, infant mortality, are things that are very close, near, and dear to my heart. I'm very passionate about it. I've been working in this space now going on about 8 years, um, with different roles, either at the bedside as a registered nurse or in case management, working for the government or a private entity. So this is my passion.
All right. All right. So let's jump right into it. Like I don't like the average person. I don't think knows what maternal mortality is. Like I don't. It's like what? Is this a word, a phrase to some people? So please educate us on like what maternal mortality is. Period.
So maternal mortality. It sounds as terrible, or it is as terrible as it sounds. Basically, it's in very general terms, it's when a mom or woman will die within a year or so of her giving birth. Now, the more technical definition, right? You can look at it as a maternal death,
Mm.
and that's defined as any death that occurs while a woman is pregnant or within 42 days of the end of the pregnancy, right? And this is caused strictly by anything that's aggravated by the pregnancy or the management of the pregnancy, right?
Mm.
Not from anything accidental or any incidental causes. So that's a maternal death. You may also hear the term pregnancy related death, right? So, and all this is a pregnancy related death is it measures up to a year after this woman had um, at the, after the end of her pregnancy. So those two terms sometimes are you hear it and it's interchangeable, but it's really two different things you're looking at. So maternal mortality is the rate then of maternal death or prenatal pregnancy-related deaths, depending on what you're looking at.
Okay. Now, the other term that you mentioned just now, what's the difference between that and maternal mortality? Since you said sometimes they're used, they're very similar, but they're
No,
two
no, no.
different things.
The term maternal mortality will encompass both a maternal death or a pregnancy-related death.
Oh,
The
okay.
time period that you're looking at is different.
Got you. Okay, okay. So pregnancy related death will be during pregnancy, and then the other one is soon after.
Actually, both of them could be a death that happens during the pregnancy. Maternal death is only until the 42 days after the pregnancy ended.
Okay.
Pregnancy-related death is up until 1 year later,
Oh,
1 year
okay.
after she's had her baby.
Got you. Got you. Understood. 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 So what is like describe the maternal mortality rates in the U.S. as opposed to that of other countries?
Okay. So to give you some background, maternal mortality is something that really should never happen at all, especially in a developed country. So in the U.S., there's about 700 women that die every year related to pregnancy-related complications. So when you think about it, on the grand scheme of things, when you look at other countries, right? Let's say in 2017, based off CDC data, in America, pregnancy-related deaths is 17.3 deaths per 100,000 live births, right? So this is where we are, at least the most recent data, this is where we are. When you look at other industrialized developed countries, I'll just pick one, for example, Germany. Their maternal mortality rate is 3.2 deaths per 100,000 live births. When you think of even Canada, it's 8.6. So the U.S. were more than twice the maternal mortality rate than any other industrialized country or any other developed country.
That's real serious, more than twice. Um, and I mean, we the good old USA, the home of the free. You know what I'm saying? The land of the free, the home of the brave. So we supposed to be the best. So
Mm-hmm.
why would we be double?
Well, there are lots of factors when you think about it. So you're right. We do have some of the, the technologies there. We have the knowledge base, but there are some things that other countries practice that we currently do not.
Mm.
So last show you had on here a doula, and she spoke so well about the benefits of doulas and having a midwife. So that was something that was significant in some of the research that's been done around what's the difference, between what other countries are doing versus what the U.S. is doing, which would attribute to the difference in rates. And one of them is actually these developed countries, and by then I'm talking about Germany, Norway, Australia, places like that, they actually have significantly more midwives than they do actual OBGYNs. So that was one thing that they noticed. Another thing that's significant too is access to home visits after delivery. The World Health Organization actually recommends that a woman gets 4 visits by a healthcare provider after she delivers her baby. In the States, maybe 1, 2 visits at best postpartum. And this becomes significant as we talk more about the reasons behind these maternal deaths. Other reasons that may attribute to or increased rates of maternal mortality could also be lack of, that's the best way to put it, mandated maternity leave, right? So in the countries that I mentioned before, the minimum maternity leave in these countries is 14 weeks. Here in the United States, if you're lucky, you might get 12 weeks off.
I'm about to say
paid,
I ain't never heard of
maybe
anybody getting 12 weeks. I've heard people talking about um, two,
6 weeks, maybe.
3, 6 weeks. You doing big stuff if you got six.
Yeah, so it just depends on where you work and things like that. But there's the reasons behind these various rates of maternal mortality or so on. It's very nuanced. There's lots of layers, but these are just some of the things that was noted in the research.
So I think it's very interesting. Like when we look at the discrepancies between the U.S. and other countries, like why we are double um, the rates of other countries when it comes to mortality deaths. So you're saying there are more with midwives, and as we
Hmm.
learned last week, some a lot of midwifery is not covered under insurance.
That's
Some
right.
are,
That is
but
absolutely correct.
a lot is not. That's one of the things that we learned last week. Okay, and then you
Hmm.
talked about the home visits. To me, it's only right. Like you as a mother, you should get somebody to come check on you, make sure ain't nothing going
Hmm.
awry. Because I mean, what you are, your husband, nine times out of ten ain't a doctor, or if he is a doctor, he might not be a doctor in the medical field, right? Um,
Hmm.
so you should be taken care of versus what's probably what I can feel what I feel like is happening here. 3 weeks in, you got to make a choice. I need to go to work and I put my life at risk, or I can stay here and take care of myself and put my job at risk, which also puts my life at risk because if I don't got my job, then I don't
Hmm.
got my health insurance, and I just gave birth. That's not the best time to not have coverage.
Right. That's a very real concern, for a lot of women here. So I think all those things contribute to the rising rates of maternal mortality in the states.
And now I could be wrong, and this is something that
Hmm.
we'll get into at a later date. But I think that this is something that is directly affected on the socioeconomic status of the family that is giving birth, because if it's not covered under insurance, it don't matter to you because you got the cash, so you just gonna go get what you need. Um, if if your boss is like you need to come in and get to work or I'm gonna fire you, it's not gonna matter because you like I'm good, like so I'm gonna take care of myself. Versus those that don't have these luxuries, and let's be real, should that be a luxury? Um,
It shouldn't.
right.
It shouldn't. And I think that's also an attitude that you can observe in many European countries and so on. Having a time to care for yourself and your baby is not considered a luxury. It's considered a universal right. So we have a paradigm shift that needs to happen, which I also believe is slowly happening here as well.
I think it was kind of interesting because I had one of my pieces have its premiere in Italy a couple years back, and I'm there, and it's my first time in Italy, so I'm like, of course I'm the only black person there, and I'm out and I'm browsing in the shops, and I noticed Cats is closing down. I'm like, what you closing for? He's like, I forgot what he called it, but it's very similar to what they call over in the Spanish countries as siesta. And
Uh-huh.
and, and my man was like, yeah, we closed down from 12 to 2 because we gonna go. It's lunch. Well, you get 2 hour lunch. Well, we got to go home. We go home. We have lunch with our families. I said, say what? Oh yeah, man. Like this, you gonna see everything is gonna close from 12 to 2. Restaurants, it don't matter because we all family is big to us here. So we gonna go home, spend time with our families and eat. So I was like, all right, cool. They gonna come back at 2. Maybe they gonna stay open till 7 instead of closing at 5. Nah, 5 o'clock, it was
We
closed,
still going on.
and I was just like, wow, and because it helps you see the importance of self care and
Hmm.
family care and how they really go hand in hand, and how it's taken in other countries and how it's taken for granted, how it's valued in other countries, I should say, and how it's taken for granted here. Um, so just hearing what you said, it multiplies that significantly because that goes hand in hand with that. In addition to why our mortality, our maternal mortality is so much higher. That's crazy. But now, let me ask you this: like, please describe
Hmm.
the maternal mortality rates here in on the Georgia red clay.
In Georgia, we're terrible,
Ooh, okay, all
for
right.
lack of a better word. It's they Georgia is probably one of the most dangerous places to deliver a baby right now.
Oh, oh, it's
I
like
want to
that.
say we rank, yes,
We the Terror Dome, huh?
we yeah, pretty bad. We we rank currently rank 49th or 50th among all the states in the
Oh,
United States. We're pretty bad. Our
oh,
maternal mortality rate is 66.3 deaths per 100,000 live births, whereas in the United States, the maternal mortality rate is 29.6. So ours
God,
is
dog.
double that of the United States.
That well, first of all, since this state is not as big as the entire country, that's a problem. Um, Second of all, like, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty it's pretty bad where we are now. But there are a lot of initiatives that's taking place. So, and we could talk more about that later. But yeah, so that's where we are. Even if you so remember the maternal mortality as it relates to maternal death is a shorter time,
Right.
right? Even if you consider pregnancy related deaths, it's still the same. As recent as 2017, Georgia was ranking 26 pregnancy related deaths per 100,000 live births.
Mm.
Of and of that number, about 70% of them were preventable, right? And then in the U.S., the pregnancy related death rate is 17.3.
Mm.
So either way, we're still significantly higher than the rest of the country.
Wow. Well, listen, we're about to go to a commercial break. So, ladies and gentlemen, just hold on a second. We're going to come back with some more information from Nurse Harriet. Please get your pens and papers ready because, as T.O. would say, it's showtime because it's going down right now. We appreciate this information. We'll be back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Osiris Effect. I'm your host, Dr. Funkenstein, and we were here talking with Nurse Harriet as she was enlightening us on maternal mortality. Um, we've learned thus far what maternal mortality is. Talked about the rates of maternal mortality between the U.S. and other countries, and to my dismay, we found out, or our dismay, we found out that we double the maternal mortality deaths throughout the world. Like we're the leader. We double those countries, which is kind of crazy. We also learned that the reason why we have these, or some of the reasons why we have these discrepancies between us, the greatest country on the planet, right, and everybody else, is because we don't give midwifery the respect it deserves. We're like we learned about that last week and how that can help when it comes to bringing life into this world throughout the educated birth topic. Um, we don't get the home visits that we should because I don't know, maybe it's not profitable or whatever the case may be. And then we don't get the maternity leave that we should have. The minimum in other country is 14 weeks. That's crazy. Think about that for a minute. That's almost 4 complete months to stay home with your baby, making sure that your baby is straight. Like most people don't even know that the husband should get maternity leave as well. Because you know what? Hey, maybe in addition to the baby getting taken care of, the wife might need to get taken care of so she don't die. That's the thing too, you know. But that's almost unheard of here in the U.S. So we learned all these things for the last 30 minutes. And now we're about to go even do an even deeper dive. So Nurse Harriet was telling us about maternal mortality rates as it comes to the state of Georgia. And I guess like my question is, and this is going to recap a little bit of what you said right before we went to commercial. Like, what does Georgia rate amongst the states? I want you to go back over that. Amongst the 50 states, like you said that Georgia was rating number 49 or 50. Please go ahead and touch over that again.
Okay, so yes, you're correct. So Georgia currently ranks, I want to say it's 49th. If not 49th or 50th, it'll alternate between the years. But yeah, Georgia, we're not the best state to have babies in at this time. It's a very dangerous place, for lack of better words, right? To deliver a baby for various reasons, or pregnancy related death rate, if you will, is about double that of the rest of the United States.
The thing that I find it very interesting, and it's a little bit of a sidebar. For years, Georgia has teetered between being number 50 and number 49 when it comes to education. And
Hmm.
now we're learning that they teeter between 50 and 49 when it comes to maternal mortality. So does Georgia have a problem with its children? Is it a
You
war
know,
against the kids?
um, that's a interesting connection. I don't know if it's as simple as that. It's usually things that are very nuanced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You'd be hard pressed to know that even though Black women are almost 3 times more likely to die as it relates to pregnancy related complications, you know, the research will show that regardless of her socioeconomic background, if she's a college educated mom, she still will fare worse than a white woman with a high school degree diploma.
Oh, now see,
So
that's
I
yeah.
don't know if there's necessarily causality around
Mm.
literacy,
Mm-hmm.
and these outcomes. It could though, because social determinants of health is a big thing, as it relates to pregnancy, as it relates to access to health care, understanding your care, that kind of thing. So it's something that I'm sure can be explored further.
So here's my question: what are the common reasons for maternal death in the U.S. versus like Georgia, since we're number one?
Uh, well, they overlap. So in the U.S. in general, main causes for maternal death are cardiovascular conditions,
Mm.
infections or sepsis,
Mm.
cardiomyopathy, hemorrhage, and embolism, right? So that's pretty general across the U.S., right? And
Mm-hmm.
then the majority of these deaths occur either on the day of delivery or about 6 weeks postpartum,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in Georgia, the reasons are similar, but the order is different. So in Georgia, the main reasons are cardiomyopathy being the first one, so that's an enlarged heart,
I was getting ready to say like
cardiovascular
we
or
need a little bit more
coronary
definition.
disease,
I'll just get ready to say that.
which would be second. The third one is hemorrhage.
Mm.
The third is embolism. Fourth is preeclampsia. We hear that's becoming quite popular these days. Preeclampsia and eclampsia. And it's the same thing. The most deaths occur between the first and 60 days after the woman has her baby.
So you said a lot of big words right there, right? Can you break that down for the rest of us? What like start from the beginning of the terms that you used and explain to us what each one is.
Well, I can put them in groups. So, cardiomyopathy, um, more often than not, when a woman is pregnant, she will gain at least 2 pounds of blood, basically, as it relates to her pregnancy, of extra fluid,
Mm.
right? So because of this additional blood, additional fluid, her body has to do a little more work to support her and her baby. So it's not unusual if you see some enlargement of the heart just to accommodate this baby, right? What's supposed to happen when she has her baby? All these changes will reverse, and she'll function as she did without her baby. With some women, these changes don't happen, and it can create problems, right? So that's where cardiomyopathy comes in. Cardiovascular or coronary disease. Sometimes some women can enter a pregnancy with a pre-existing cardiac problem. This could also be maybe hypertension or high blood pressure that was developed as a result of the pregnancy that did not resolve, that actually became worse during the pregnancy. I've actually taken care of I believe she was 24 years old, and she actually had a heart attack during labor. So that could be an example of what that looks like.
Wow.
Hemorrhage goes without saying that, uncontrolled bleeding that can actually cost the woman her life, right? Usually happens like right at delivery. An embolism is the movement either of a clot or foreign body into the blood vessels that makes it difficult either for a mom to breathe, or it can block off a blood vessel so there's not circulation going to major organs. A very fatal form of an embolism is an amniotic fluid embolism. That can kill a mom like almost immediately. And then preeclampsia, we're seeing a lot more of that these days. Preeclampsia is actually a condition that affects a woman's blood pressure, right? And it can also show signs of that there are changes going on with other organs, right? So preeclampsia looks like swelling, excessive, unusual swelling for a mom, high blood pressures. She can have proteins in her urine, which may show that her kidney isn't functioning the way it should. All these things come together, and that can lead into eclampsia, where this mom can suffer seizures, she can suffer hemorrhage, she can suffer a stroke. There are lots of things that can happen to that. So that's preeclampsia. These are all the conditions in a nutshell. I hope that was helpful.
No. You broke it down. Especially when you said the young lady had a heart attack during birth. I'm like, whoa, because you think, a heart attack is somebody up in age
Somebody
would
older.
have, right?
Mm-hmm.
You won't think that that's something that somebody 24 years old would have.
Right.
Wow.
That was my experience as well. I'm like, you're 24.
So why do you feel like Georgia is so high? Because Georgia is like doubling the rest of the country when it comes to maternal mortality. What is it that we are missing that other states have?
Well, there's a lot of things. And it mirrors the United States, but I think in our case, it may just be enhanced or more exaggerated. One of the things, so if you remember when we were talking about with the more developed countries, the industrialized countries where they have access to midwives and so on,
Right.
Georgia, there's a shortage in OBGYN.
Mm.
Of the I think it's 158 counties in Georgia. Don't quote me on that number, but I think it's a 158. there is 93 of those counties in Georgia that does not have a birthing hospital. These are also areas, we call them deserts, that they don't even have an OBGYN, let alone a specialist, if they were to have complications in their pregnancies.
So how you gonna
So that's
have
one thing.
so you don't have the OBGYN and midwives are not really given what they need, the respect that they need, so they can be used more often. So they really are deserts, like, cause you on your own.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are 6 regional perinatal centers that try to bridge the gap for women, in those more rural areas. But then you have to also think about the other social determinants of health. So if you have a major hospital, let's say in the Albany region, South Georgia, transportation is a real thing. It's very likely that you can just call an Uber. You
Mm,
know what I mean? When you're in Grady County, South Georgia.
mm.
So that's also another thing. Access is also a contributing factor. Um, timely care, timely and consistent prenatal care. That's not specific to Georgia only,
Mm-hmm.
but just across the board, having women to come in at least 13 visits through their pregnancy, is still a challenge in some areas. So
Okay.
those are just some of the reasons. But one of the ones that strikes out to me the most is the concern about the providers.
Okay, I got you. So now let me shift gears and ask you two things.
Mhm.
What is maternal morbidity and
Uh-huh.
what is a near miss?
Okay, I thought you would never ask. So, so as you mentioned, maternal mortality, right? You think to yourself, "Oh my gosh, this is really bad." Think of maternal mortality as an iceberg,
Okay.
right? Maternal mortality is the tip of the iceberg that you can see. The bottom of the iceberg, what you cannot see, is maternal morbidity.
But that's the
So,
biggest part of the iceberg.
right. So I'll tell you what the maternal morbidity is. This includes any unexpected outcomes of labor and delivery that can result in significant short or long-term consequences to a woman's health.
Mm,
So these are the women that maybe they didn't die, but they were close. You know what I mean?
right, because the doctor
So
gave her a
it's
C-section and nicked the artery by accident.
it, or maybe this is a mom, like I mentioned before, she had a full heart attack during her delivery. That's
That's
not supposed
wild.
to happen. That's not normal.
Right.
Maybe she bled out and required more than 4 units of blood. Maybe she had a hysterectomy. All of those things. There's women that survive, you know what I mean? But it's not captured, because, well, we're doing a better job of capturing that data. But that's what severe maternal morbidity is.
Mm.
And that's why it's called a near miss.
Oh, because you almost died.
Yeah, pretty much. And
Wow.
it's not typical, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, this too, these rates of maternal morbidity is also increasing over the years. According to the CDC, these severe maternal morbidity cases has increased almost 200% over the years.
200%?
Hmm.
Do you know like what year range are you talking about? 5 years,
So
10?
where the most recent data is we were at 49.5 rates of these maternal morbidity cases in 1993, and it's up to 144 in 2014.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. So you said what was what was the first data in '93?
49 and a half.
And then
So
now
it
you said
basically
we
tripled, almost tripled
yo, and you talk
in the
about in
space of about 20 years.
20 years.
hmm And this, these rates of maternal morbidity, these rates is primarily driven by like the need for blood transfusion. So hemorrhage. Remember, I was telling you
Right.
that was one of those significant causes of death is hemorrhage. Yeah.
This is the reason why it's so important for you to have an educated birth, and the reason why I wanted to have last week's show, because birth doesn't just it's not a thing you think about after you pregnant. You got to think about
Right.
that way before you pregnant. On the male side, you got to make sure you right so your seed could be right. You know what I'm saying? On the female side, she got to make sure that you know she right. So when the seed is planted, it can be growing in fertile ground. And then if you do that, then you're less likely to be in a scenario where you have a natural situation where you have a heart attack during during birth, or you know it's less likely that you know your body is fighting against you when you're doing this very natural thing, you know. And if you do deal with something, it's because of something that was external, like, oh my goodness.
And it's also helpful to be mindful about pre-existing conditions too.
Right.
So when you think of an educated birth, it's also a woman saying, "I have this pre-existing pre pre-existing condition. I'm sorry. How is this going to affect my pregnancy? Let
Right.
me get my resources together so that I can get the best care for both me and my baby."
And then you ready, and then it's the scenario where you have a plan, and if something
Right.
comes about, you already have your contingency A, B, and C set. So it's more likely that that won't be a scenario where it takes you out, you know, because you prepared for it.
Right.
Like if a woman has sickle
hmm
cells is kind of deep. If you're trying to have a baby and you have sickle cell, you need to have a plan.
Right. Exactly so. And you also want to be aware of what your resources are, where your resources are. It makes a difference if you're a mom with sickle cell who's pregnant that's in a rural county without a birthing hospital. Maybe, this is an opportunity to get closer to a specialist, maybe, closer to a major city,
Mm-hmm.
so you have to plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now let me ask you, what's the difference? And this is what I've been waiting for. What's the difference in the rate of morbidity in
Uh-huh.
African American women and in white women?
Oh, the health disparities are there. It's a
Hmm.
real thing. Health disparities in maternal mortality exist. For example, in 2017, the count for maternal mortality or pregnancy-related deaths was about 42 deaths for 100,000 births for Black women, right?
Mm-hmm.
For white women, the rate was 13.4.
So almost half, right?
So
Versus,
if you want to read the reverse of that, it's almost three times, more than three times, Black women are at a higher risk of death
mm-hmm,
than white women.
that's a problem to me.
And it follows the same trend as it relates to morbidity rates as well, those near misses.
So now and this is something. This is part of the reason why I wanted to do this topic in the first place, because to me, you know, you have people that look at the small picture. But I look, it's the micro, right? I love looking at the macro.
Mhm.
I have to look at the big picture, and I'm gonna draw this. I'm gonna connect these dots for you. The Planned Parenthood, right? We talked
Mhm.
about last week how it was created, and the young lady who created it. You can look it up on your own, ladies and gentlemen. She was known to be down with the Nazis, and she said, "Listen, I'm gonna go ahead and create this thing here, and my whole goal is to limit the birthability of African Americans because they're trash and they don't need to be like out here out birthing us, because if they continue to outbirth us, then they will outnumber us, and we can't let the monkeys outnumber us, right? So this is almost verbatim what she was saying. And if you look at
Mhm.
our birth rates and how it equals what is looked at as extinction, her reasoning and her methodology is correct. Now, Planned Parenthood is not all bad, right? But knowing
Mhm.
why it was created, it don't sit right with me, right?
Right.
That's why, personally, you know, I'm kind of like, yeah, birth control, all of that stuff. I want my people to reproduce, right? But that's a whole nother conversation. Now, you draw that parallel to the direct uh, 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 information that you just gave and the statistics that you just gave when it comes to the morbidity rates and the maternal mortality
Mhm.
rates as it pertains to white women and African American women.
Mhm.
Like, the scale is so unequally tipped, right? And this is something that no female should be dealing with, no family should be dealing with. But to
Mhm.
see, I can see where is directed. I can see where it's almost aimed, if you will. And this is why it's important for us as a people to have an educated birth, know what we are trying to do, and if we're going to enter into these types of sexual relationships, make sure we enter into them wisely, so that way if we do bring a life into this world, we have a plan on how that life is going to be supported, right? And then making sure that we are paying attention and doing self-care, and having our plan, so that way our educated birth can be carried out safely, so that way we are not in any morbidity rates or any more maternal mortality rates going forward. That's my 2 cents though. um
Agreed. Um, Another thing that we didn't touch on, as you mentioned, Margaret Sangster for, I believe that was her name, for Planned Parenthood, um, because of her uh, discriminatory beliefs, that also seems to carry over for some of the causes of maternal mortality. So you may or may not have heard of some states and some cities. For instance, the state of Ohio, I think it's San Bernardino County, I believe, in California, have now recognized public health racism as a public health issue or a public health crisis. Right.
mm,
Um, a mentor of mine, at least in my head, her name is Dr. Kamara Phyllis Jones. She was the past president of the American Public Health Association. She describes racism as a system of structuring opportunity and assigning value based on the social interpretation of how one looks, or what we
mm,
call race, right? And that unfairly disadvantages some individuals and communities, and unfairly advantages other individuals and communities, and saps the strength of the whole society through waste of human resources.
mm,
So, in essence, um, racism or discrimination or preferential treatment can be harmful because what it does, it can inhibit or access to proper health care. It because of when you assign a value to someone based off their race, if you assign the value of a black person to be less than that of a white person, you don't treat them the same.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Mm-hmm.
research to suggest that black people are often, what's the best word, undertreated for pain.
Oh yeah, because we super strong.
Um,
We got a higher tolerance for pain.
right?
Yeah.
And if you were, and there's studies, there was one study in New York City actually. Um, it was a 2006 analysis of 5 years of data with college educated moms, right, who gave birth in local hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
And they're, they had these traumatic experiences, and it was all because they felt as if the doctors did not listen to their initial complaints.
Well, I mean,
Um, I have,
I can totally understand that because when my stepfather was fighting for his life, God rest his soul, my mother, who's a nurse, said, "Hey man, I think this is cancer, so I think y'all should look into X, Y, and Z." And they just looked at her like, "All right, whatever. You don't know what you're talking about." And she's like, "Yo, I think this is cancer. He exudes X, Y, and Z signs. Why aren't you testing for it?" And then my mom not the person that gonna take no for an answer. So she kept going at their head. And then when they finally tested for it, it's like, oh my God, she's right. Really? And it's like, why do the complaints of black women, black people, period, go on deaf ears? Does it is it your money that you're spending when it comes to billing for this test? What's wrong with testing for it? You know what I'm saying? Like, if anything, I'd rather err on the side of caution than on the side of negligence any day.
but that's the as Dr. Kamara Jones had mentioned in the definition of racism is the assignment of value.
Hmm.
If that life wasn't seen as valuable, then why would I, do the
And
extra work?
and
An example,
this goes back to something that I be saying on the Sankofa Paradox Sundays at 5:30. Right? I've always said that we need to have our own. What do I mean by that? We need to build our own city, have our own doctors, have our own police force, have our own schools, have our own educators. Because in those situations, and of course, you have to make sure those are quality people, right? But in those situations, you're not going to have to worry about that life being viewed as not valuable because he or she will be viewed as valuable because the person treating them is like, that's my people. The person teaching the children, that's my people. The person policing the community, it's my people. It eliminates a lot of problems that we currently deal with. I had a debate with a friend of mine the other day. I'm like, why are you going to keep asking this white man to stop beating you over the head? He not going to do it. So you put yourself in a situation where you don't have the opportunity to do it. Build your own. But please continue.
um, black voices not being heard, or black women or women of color
Mm-hmm.
not being heard,
Mm-hmm.
is a predominant complaint. So now where you're seeing where racism is actually being looked at as a public health issue, it may open up opportunities for improvement, because now we're naming a thing a thing. Popular maternal mortality cases that really demonstrate where providers were just not listening. You may be familiar with Kira Johnson. She's a very popular case. Her husband is Charles Johnson. This is a black couple, educated, well-to-do family. They were married. Um, and she tragically lost her life after a routine C-section, right, in California. Her husband um, asked the nurse, please come check on my wife. She's bleeding, she's having pain, she's in discomfort. His wife had a Foley catheter, which is typical after a C-section, but the Foley catheter is to drain urine.
Mm.
And Mr. Johnson described that there was blood in the drainage bag, That's not normal. And long story short, they waited 10 hours before they intervened.
10
10
hours.
hours.
Wow.
And she ended up bleeding to death. That's really what happened with her. That's what. Now, if the nurse or the provider, acted on it, she probably would have been with us today. Another popular story is Shalon Irving. This is local. She's a 36-year-old epidemiologist that worked for the CDC. So again, you're seeing examples of women that are college educated, advanced degrees, perfectly aware of educated birth, right? And had the support and everything. She too died from complications of pregnancy. Hers was related to high blood pressure 3 weeks after giving birth. Now, her story is similar in that she complained of dizziness. She complained of, headaches. And there was no one to follow up with her, no one to check the blood pressures, none of that. And she died.
Yeah.
So when you start to classify racism, structural racism, implicit bias as something to be studied and something that needs intervention for the sake of the public's health, I think we'd be making strides in improving some of these maternal mortality cases.
Well, let me ask you this, like, and this is one of our listeners actually sent this in. How does maternal mortality and and morbidity, excuse me, relate to surrogacy?
How does it relate to what?
Surrogacy. So, like those, what about the multiple surrogacy, the risks when it comes to morbidity and maternal mortality?
Surrogacy, meaning, just so I'm clear, so that this is a woman that will opt to carry a baby or endure a pregnancy for a family who otherwise are not able to be pregnant.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, maternal mortality, I don't know, and it has different layers. For example, if a woman who chooses to be a surrogate, right, if she will probably have a higher risk of harm. Let's say she has maybe more than 3 or 4 C-sections. The more C-sections you have, the higher risk you have of hemorrhage, for example, right? So that mom could potentially be at risk, for maternal mortality. So, I mean, it's nuanced. It's not to say that she will,
Right.
but if that was a situation where she was having like more than 3 or 4 C-sections, that could put her in that risk category.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it just would depend. A surrogacy, it's provided that she would have optimum prenatal care under normal circumstances. She should still have a good outcome.
Right. Okay. Okay. So now,
Maternal mortality is very nuanced,
right.
So it's one of those things you take case by case.
Understood. Understood. So now, what is being done? We talked a lot about the different things that are ailing us when it comes to maternal mortality and morbidity. But what is being done to help to fix these problems? What are some initiatives that are being acted, or what
The,
should be some initiatives that should be enacted?
there are lots of initiatives now. There's lots. One thing that Georgia's doing, we do have a maternal mortality review committee. So basically, for every mom that dies, a collaboration of health professionals, and it's not even just health professionals, just different stakeholders that will review the chart to try to figure out what was the cause of death and what were things that could be done to prevent, the death. So that's ongoing. There are safety and quality initiatives, right? So remember when I was sharing that hemorrhage is one of those major causes of maternal death. So a lot of hospitals have implemented safety bundles to be able to quickly recognize and act on signs of hemorrhage after a woman delivered her baby. So that's one thing that's there. There are also safety initiatives around preeclampsia as well, right? Or a cardiac event. There are some hospitals that take into consideration a woman's risk factor and kind of strategize it so they'll know, what to prepare for, so to speak. Right? So that falls under a safety or quality initiative. There's a lot of programs around community and provider engagement. So the American College of Obstetrician and Gynecologists, they're like the experts, go-to persons for all things labor and delivery, right?
Okay.
So they have initiative called Every Mom, Every Time. And they focus on quality initiatives. They focus on cultural competencies. They focus on optimizing postpartum care research. So there's that. There are fatherhood initiatives as well to kind of allow men to be aware of warning signs of things, being aware of what preeclampsia looks like, and with that education, allow them to advocate for their significant other. There are other community initiatives that's going on also from different community groups to include Healthy Start or Rose or somewhere like that. So there's a lot of work that's going on. There are currently legislation that's, up to be passed or at least to be reviewed around, supporting initiatives to states to help to reduce the maternal mortality rates among the women of that state. So there's a lot of things going on now.
Okay. So now, I guess, what is some things that we as a community can do to help?
The first thing that comes to my mind is advocacy.
Well, a lot of
Because
people say advocacy, but what does that mean?
So what that means is, you see how your mother was very relentless, was very, persistent in saying, look at this, you need to check this out and so on. What it appears is that for the maternal deaths that occur primarily with minority women or women of color, is that the cries for help wasn't heard. So it appears as though what would have to happen then is a source of advocacy. Advocacy also includes education. So back to an educated birth, not just knowing how you want to deliver, where you want to deliver, but also know what is normal and what isn't. So being able to advocate for yourself or advocate for your significant other. Again, with an educated birth, maybe you consider a midwife, just considering your own risk status, right? Or maybe a doula. Those are some initiatives actually that's being introduced for women of color as a way to mitigate some of the risks associated with maternal death or pregnancy complicated, is the reintroduction of the midwife and the doula in the birthing experience for Black and brown women.
Which is basically going back to what we had,
what we used to do.
right? When great grandma, well, not great grandma, but grandma was out there, or auntie was out there, and helping the young lady give birth.
Right. Another thing, there's a lot of things you could do within your communities. There's some areas that experienced moms will pair with a first-time mom, to kind of coach her through that process to know what's normal. Again, this is another vein of advocacy. Maybe you want to partner with your local Healthy Start. Maybe you partner with your local hospitals. There are some hospitals now that are collaborating with community members on task force, that will function to see if they can make a dent in these kind of poor outcomes. So that's another option that you can explore as well. So those are just a few things. You could, if you want to take it on a political level, perhaps, you follow policies that are on the table now, that are in support of research, education, funding for implementation, to improve maternal outcomes. That could be a way that you go as well, So there's lots of opportunities to help.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you were taking notes as we were given these jewels uh, 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 by nurse Harriott. Ma'am, we'd like to thank you so much for lending us your expertise and educating us in this field. We appreciate you, and we love to have you back in the future.
Thanks for having me.
And ladies and gentlemen, please make sure you tune into the Osiris Effect Friday nights from 6 to 7 p.m. And as always, remember, protest like Martin, demand like Malcolm, lead like Harriet, resist like Ashada, fight like Toussaint, sing like Nina, rap and write like Gil. And if you don't know who these people are, you better go look them up. Agitate like Douglas, organize like Garvey, and build like Black Wall Street. God bless.